Welcome to the Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. Larry is the author of over 40 books, the founder of Dove International, a worldwide family of churches and ministries in 6 continents, and has over 50 years of leadership experience. He and his guests will share inspirational leadership insights from their journey with God. These insights, gleaned from serving leaders in many nations, will transform your life and leadership. For more information on Larry's books and resources, visit LarryKreider.com.
Welcome to the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast. This is your host, Larry Kreider. So glad you've joined us. We learn these small changes we can make in our lives in this podcast that can make a major difference in our lives and those we serve in leadership. With me in the studio today is Steve and Mary Prokopchaks. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So glad
Thanks
you
for
are
having
here.
us.
I've known you for so many years, worked together for so many years. And we're going to really focus today on marriage and how to help people have a strong marriage, have pre-marital counseling. What does that look like? And you guys have paved the way for so many years on this. Let's talk a bit first about the two of you. Talk about where you come from, how you met, how did you meet each other?
Yeah, well, we're married 47 years.
Wow.
So been married quite a long time and know each other quite a bit longer than that. We actually met in high school.
Really? Mary, what was that like? What was she
We
like
did.
in high school? I'd love to know.
Well, we only had one class together. It was history class in 9th grade. But I just want to back up and say I had been praying for the person I was going to marry since I was 12 years old.
Wow, that's so cool.
So I did not know that this guy who sat in my homeroom, 7th through 12th grade, and who was behind me in history class, was the one I was praying for.
Wow.
And he became a Christian when he was 17 in our senior year. And I was attracted to him because he was passionate about his faith.
Wow.
And a lot of the guys that I knew were not. And so that drew me to a relationship with him.
Wow.
And we had a long-distance relationship by letters while he was in the military.
Exactly.
And then we got engaged and married. So,
And you get
yeah.
engaged and married. Tell us a bit about your story from there. Because I know you were in northern Pennsylvania. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, we had a couple of years. I had to finish out. I was in the military during the
Right.
Vietnam era, so we had a couple of years to finish that out. And Mary had finished nursing school. She was an RN and working full-time. We left there and we did go into 8 years of mission work with adjudicated delinquent boys.
Right.
And so we served there in northern PA for 8 years as missionaries, lived by faith. And it grew our I think, leadership capabilities.
Sure.
It grew our marriage because there's a lot of pressure. And pressure produces something, the faith to believe for finance, to support your family, and all those things that happen while you're serving in a missionary type of atmosphere. Well, we went from there, and then we helped to start a nonprofit organization in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Moved back down to Harrisburg, which is our home area anyways.
Right.
And there we helped to start a nonprofit for, again, foster care. Did that for a few years and was in a graduate school program, studying counseling and psychology and all of that. And then we were attending this church called Dove Christian Fellowship
I've heard of that
International.
church. Yeah.
And the leader of Dove was Larry Kreider.
I
And
remember him.
yeah, Larry met us, and Larry seemed to want to pursue us for helping him there in that movement.
Well, I was a young pastor with a growing church, a lot of young people, and trying to handle premarital counseling. How do you do all those things? I was even teaching the counseling class, you might
Yes,
remember.
yeah, I did.
And I'm not a counselor. I've learned later it's just not who I am. So I did pursue you. I remember buying you many dinners until you finally said yes.
I think I had like 5 dinners from you.
You did.
I was telling Mary one day, I don't know how long I can farm this out, but it's really nice. Yeah. But we were trying to finish school, and
Sure.
we were trying to start to build a house, and then you're asking us to change our workplace. And so I did come on. I think January would be 36 years. Came on just to volunteer. And the major difference I found between the sociology work that I was doing or social work that I was doing to coming to Dove and counseling was that I actually had people sitting across from me that wanted to change.
Right.
They actually wanted the
Sure.
input that you could give them. And so that for me made a huge difference. And so in May of 1987, we made the change and came on staff by faith. It's the only way to live, by the way. It's by
That's true.
faith.
True. Now, before we get into talking about premarital counseling and your book, Called Together, has gone all over the world, helped thousands and thousands of people. If you were to think about those early years of leadership, if there's one thing that stuck out to you, one leadership principle you learned through, the nonprofit organization, all the stuff that you guys did, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the one thing would be that you can trust God.
Okay.
You can truly trust God, that He truly is on your side,
Yes.
and that at the end of the day, no matter what you go through, faith is working something. God is working something in your heart. He's growing you as a leader. And it's those difficult times where you change the most, not the easy times. I mean, we want the easy times, but it's the difficult times where we change the most. And so I think at the end of the day, as we look back, we could say we could trust God for finance. We could trust God for our emotional support, our spiritual support. We could trust God for our own relationship. We could trust God for the ministry, for the kids that we worked with. Like, that trust and faith in God just grew
Beautiful.
during those, I think, pressure-filled years.
Beautiful. Mary, anything you want to add?
Actually, just as a takeoff of what he said, God's faithfulness through the years for provision,
So true.
for his protection, for his guidance. So when we go through something difficult now, we just look at each other and say, God is faithful. He's so faithful. We know that he'll provide, or we'll get through this, or he has something else, or he'll lead us. His faithfulness is amazing.
Well, he has been to your lives and all of our lives, and we've been so blessed by your lives. God brought you on our team at the right time. Of course, today you serve in the International Apostolic Leadership Council. You oversee churches in all over the world, places like the Caribbean, all over the United States, and on and on. But a real key way that God's used you over the years was helping people understand marriage, godly marriage, biblical marriage, and helping people prepare for marriage. And you wrote this book years ago, Called Together. You bailed me out. I was doing the premarital counseling. Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
And you took my place on that, and you did such a much better job than I ever did. You even started teaching the counseling classes that I was teaching. I'm eternally grateful to God for you guys serving all these years in so many nations of the world. But let's talk about this whole Called Together book that has gone all over the world. And I meet people all over the world who say this has helped us so much in our marriage, back in premarital counseling days, even postmarital counseling days. And talk about, how did you get a vision to actually write this book? How did that all start?
May we remind you that you're the one that came to me with a bunch of loose leaf pieces of paper.
You remember
and
that?
said, this is our premarital, and you said, I think we need help. And I said, well, okay, let's look at it, and then let's try to sit down with the couples that had this, and let's ask them about what was important. So we really studied and tried to find everyone that had gone through any type of premarital counseling. Of course, postmarital was unheard of at the time, and that there wasn't any follow-up to their counsel if they did marry. And I guess if there's a skewed part to that is we could only measure what they had. We couldn't measure, what they didn't have. So we did then have to look at other materials that were out there. And we bought and purchased and sent for, we didn't have the internet then, of course, but we sent for and purchased everything that we could possibly find that did any type of premarital, and talked to more and more couples and just said, what would have you liked to have had if you didn't have it? And then, of course, we asked ourselves that same question: what, if we were doing this all over again, what did we miss? What would we really want to have happen in premarital?
So how did you put this whole thing together? I mean, what's the methodology behind Called Together?
Well, so I think what ended up happening, we heard three main subjects come from those couples.
Okay.
Communication, the finances, and the sexual area.
Right.
And so those were the three big areas that we knew we needed to hit. But something else that was vital that those couples said, that I think is what really Called Together is built on.
Right.
They said, we really feel like the best way to receive counseling is to sit down with another couple and do this thing from couple to couple. And they said some of their input was that we even possibly not go into the busy pastor's office, which many times was a male, and the female side wasn't represented in the counseling. And so they said, could we sit down with a pastoral couple or a couple that would lead us through this process, so where she would feel comfortable as well to have a woman present. And so the whole thing is built on that. Like the whole equipping ministry out of Ephesians, can we equip the saints for the work of ministry? And there are many saints out there that are married, have some marriage years under their belt. They don't have perfect marriages. That's not what we're looking for. What we really want to find is those couples who are called to perhaps mentor another couple, and that they take them through this premarital counseling. And of course, it's all overseen by their pastors, and they're communicating with them about how they're doing and whether they do believe they are called together, they should be married. But then once they're married, they don't stop. They come back with their counselors once again and walk through a couple of postmarital chapters.
Yeah, well, one of the great blessings of this has been, I remember very well when I was serving as pastor, and then you took on this role, but it didn't stop with the two of you. I love that, so that couples with healthy marriages could help other couples find the way of God in a healthy marriage, and through using this amazing book. And Mary, anything you want to add?
I think the postmarital brings accountability to the couples that they wouldn't have normally if they just go through premarital. The postmarital brings us in when the rubber meets the road.
Sure.
After all the emotion and all the ceremony and all of the to do with the wedding, you get actually into the marriage, and it's like, oh, this is why we had a chapter on this. Oh, this is because they think they communicate really, really well, and they think they're not going to struggle in finances and all of those things premarital, and then once the wedding is done, postmarital gives us a chance to just say, how are you really doing now? And bring some accountability, at least that first year. But you know what we found? Some couples, we continued to meet once a year for years, and we call it their postmarital checkup. We do something fun together or just stay in relationship. And you can't do that with everybody that you do premarital with, but there are certain couples that we still have great relationships with them, and it's because of the premarital and the postmarital that we did with them. Yeah.
Well, walk us through the book. Walk us through the sections of the book, if you would, please.
Yeah, so there are 6 chapters in the premarital section, and those chapters, first of all, they look at what about me? So it's a real thorough look. So this whole book is really built as a workbook. It's not built as a huge content book, and it's a workbook that we can just walk through with our counselor couples. So we require the homework to be done prior to the session, and then they can send in, we have on our website a way to electronically download that homework, and they can fill it in, and they can send that to their premarital counselors. And we like the counselors to have that so that they can sit down and review the answers. Now, there's enough of work here that 2 hours is not enough time to sit with this couple. So they're going to have to pick some of the things that they want them to go through thoroughly, and some things that perhaps that they don't. So chapter 1 is really looking at ourselves and how do we perceive marriage, and what are all these different things about me, and my spiritual overview, and we have them build even an individual mission statement. And then chapter 2, they go into what about us, and they talk about the two of us. And we've had couples say to us, we thought we talked about most everything until we got into your book and realized there were questions that we didn't even think of asking ourselves. So they talk about the two of them, and then the chapter 3, we go into communication. And that's a whole chapter on just nonverbal communication and communication guidelines and lots of fun exercises. And some of these exercises the couples will themselves work together on. Many of them will be individual. So we really like them to do their individual work, and that way they are not skewing their answers by looking at each other's work and thinking, I don't want to put what I really think because that'll cause a disagreement. The 4th chapter, we look at finances. We actually get into a whole budget with them. And that's very, very revealing when we talk about money. How did your parents deal with money? How do you deal with money? How do you use credit cards? And do you have a savings account? And
do you have debt?
Do you have debt?
Do you have debt is a huge
We have
one.
found such, these poor kids coming out of college and wanting to get married, and then they both have college debt, and they have a car debt, and they're paying rent for their apartments and all of those things. And when you put that down into an annual budget, it's like, oh my, we can't spend more than we're making. And so it's a really good picture of all of that.
Pretty revealing.
Yeah, and many of the couples didn't have a budget or didn't even understand how to operate on a budget. So there's a whole lot of educational piece with this as well. And then we go into the intimacy area or sexual relations, and it's an area that we hit pretty hard. And we also hold them accountable to what we call their sexual boundaries. Actually, in the first chapter, they have to write about what those boundaries are. And then we will ask them about them and how they're doing with their boundaries and hold them accountable to their boundaries.
And Steve's tenacious. That's like one of his first questions. How are you doing with your boundaries? Because they created their boundaries, not we didn't create them.
Right.
And so if they've had failure, then we talk about that, pray, repent, and start over again. But lots of times they're like, oh, we're so glad you're asking us, because nobody's willing to ask us anymore.
So good.
You know.
Yeah, and so we believe in accountability through the process. The last chapter in the premarital is the marriage, actual building the marriage ceremony, and are you called together? Sure. You know, there's no better time to back out than now, not after you say I do. And so we give them every opportunity to do that. In fact, we want to be a little controversial in that we want to make or break this couple. We really want them to know that they are called together and that they have a like mission and they're going forward in that mission. And if they're not, if it's too different, and if they're just not ready, or it's just not the right time, or there's some personal issues that need to be cared for, maybe some side counseling over that, then maybe it needs to be delayed. Now that's rare, but it does happen at times. And many times the pastor who's going to marry them, if the couple who's taking them through this is not licensed to marry, many times the pastor then takes them through that final chapter to build their ceremony.
Now, I've got a whole bunch of more questions I want to ask you, but for anyone listening, let's say a pastor's listening right now saying, how do I get this material? Or how do I get trained? Or can you train our people in our church on this? How do they do that?
Yeah, well, we do live trainings. We've done that a lot, but because we've done it so much and because travel became so difficult in these recent years, we actually recorded it all and put it into 4 recordings that are found on the Called Together website or on Dove International's website. And those trainings are there and they're free. So pastors can take those counseling training, as well as there's also a counselor's guide in the back of our book and a lot of additional wisdom pieces, but there's a counselor's guide back there walking couples through this process. I would say pastors need to recommend couples that they want to have take their engaged couples through this process. But that training is available and it is online, and we're giving it away free, specifically walking through the Call Together process.
And we get, for all these listening today, this is all in the show notes. Check out the show notes, Stephen Mary Prokopchaks, calltogether.org or Dove International, DCFI.org, obviously. And all these materials, all this is on the website, and you avail yourself to that, please. All right, now, why do you focus so much on post-marital counseling?
Yeah, as Mary said, the rubber meets the road. And so doing premarital, I think it's kind of good to have your head in the clouds and, think that all is well. And there's just some non-reality to that season, and that's okay. We don't want to destroy that. And so we don't really want to dig into everything that we think, oh, that's a little... I don't know. That might change, or that's
could become a problem.
Could become a problem. Yeah, like we're going to visit my parents, every other night, and his parents
the off
night. So things like that, and so we want to follow up on those things. So we do. So we kind of split the book in half, and we follow up on the first half of the book in the first postmarital session, plus new material, and then we follow up on the second half of the book in the second session. We follow up at 3 months and we meet again at 9 months. And many times we follow up beyond that because couples just want to have another session. The thing is built on relationships. So in reality, the book takes a back seat to what's happening between the two couples relationally. Right. And it's so valuable to have what a couple might perceive as spiritual parents who are literally speaking into their lives, who are saying, volunteering the mistakes that they made, being vulnerable. And, we ask for confidentiality, of course. But we are held accountable to the pastoral oversight in the local church, who will be held accountable to the Lord for the marriage of this couple. Right. So we do want to be able to share how well that they're doing. We don't go into detail with their lives, but we do want to make sure that that we feel, anyways, that we're confident that they're walking through the process and in a righteous manner, and are are called together.
Obviously, the proof is in the pudding, as they say, and we've seen the Lord use this material that you've written. How many years ago? I mean, all over the world.
Yeah, we actually started. It was a 3-ring binder, if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
And I think that was 1989 or 90.
Wow.
And then so many churches were asking for it, were hearing about it, and we were giving it away. And finally, we thought, well, we ought to publish this somehow. And we were able to obtain a loan, and we self-published.
It was a godly couple that came to us and said, we believe in this, and we're going to lend you the money to first do this. And we're like, wow, okay. And we paid them back. I mean, but they believed in us and what was happening, and it was great. Beautiful. It was God's provision again. Yeah.
And then finally, God gave us a publisher, and the rest is history. But the thing about it, even though we mentioned a date that long ago, we have constantly updated this thing.
I've watched you do that.
You don't really ask about a checkbook anymore. You ask about credit cards and debits and online banking, and a lot of things have changed. Yeah. So
I have recommended this book all over the world, Called Together, Steve and Mary Prokopchaks. And you talk a little bit about your model for training counselors in the local church, which I think sets us apart a bit from a lot of materials, a lot of good materials out there, but it really sets us apart. Talk a bit more about that. What's that look like?
Well, we really love that because we've had couples say to us, our premarital counseling was sitting with a group of couples and watching a video.
Wow.
And there's no intimacy in that. You don't know if they're learning anything or not. There's really no feedback with all of that. Or they did it in a group. And a lot of couples resisted that. They really wanted their own personal touch. And the other thing we found is that pastors, man, they're busy.
Really?
They are really busy. And then if you actually have a problem, how do you get back to the door, to knock on that door of a very, very busy pastor who's already overwhelmed with their responsibilities? So we discovered that Ephesians model of equipping the saints, giving it away to couples who desire to be in marriage ministry. Yeah, so... And we've been able to train couples, goodness, in different continents, and
you sure have.
It's been a real joy to be able to do that in different languages. And I think it's the spirit of this is that this older, more mature mentoring couple wants this younger couple to succeed.
Correct.
And they take a personal interest in that, and that builds something that's lifelong.
Right. Mary, you want to add anything to that?
Yes. I think the thing that makes it different also from other premaritals is the addendums in the back.
Right.
When seniors lose a spouse and they want to remarry, there's a whole section on that. And when there's a divorce, and is it a biblical divorce? And if it is, they can remarry. And so we had to go through all of that, the theology of all of that, and have that approved. And intercultural marriages, interracial marriages, all those special areas that come up, and we sat down with the people. We didn't try to make up questions. It was like we sat down with people who actually went through that and said, okay, what was your biggest challenge, or what were you dealing with that nobody else thought of, and how did your children react to you getting remarried, or you marrying somebody from a different culture or a different race. And so we built our questions on actually interviewing those couples, and they were so helpful, and they were so honest. I mean, truly honest with us. So that's a piece that I really appreciate, that it's not just, here you just do the succession and it's over, because we've already had a couple that was a remarriage. They were seniors. They were interculturally married and going to live in another country. And so it was like, wow, we did the whole book with them. I mean, all the addendums too. Right. So you just, you look at this book and you think, it's such a big book, we'll never get through it. But truly the book is only like maybe half of it. And the addendums are the other half, right. Right.
Post-marital addendums.
Right. So it's not impossible to do. And plus you have those extra chapters that are an extra touch for people that have different situations, you know. Yeah.
And since the two of you are global ministers, and you've ministered in continents all over the world and countries throughout the world, it brings something to this material that often you don't have. There's a lot of books written by Americans, it's all American, but you have all these extra options that you have. And so how else is this resource different from other resources? I know there's lots of good resources, but how is this different from other resources?
Well, this resource really has a lot of homework requirement. So they do have to do homework. So they're thinking outside of the session, and they're communicating outside of the session. And so we know that a lot of the assignments say for this individual, the guy, or this individual, the woman, to respond to their homework individually. But what happens is they can't wait to find out what that other person wrote. And so sometimes those things are shared, and it's different in that it's provocative by nature. We're really trying to provoke this couple to a very solid, Christ-centered relationship, or to discover that they really are not called together and this is not the time. So the other piece that I love about this couple-to-couple thing is that there is accountability through this process. We've heard so many times when a couple gets engaged, everybody leaves them alone. And they're like, okay, they're on their way, now we just leave them alone. And they don't hold them accountable with their physical boundaries. They're not holding them accountable in their relationships, and even with their friend relationships, so that, things can go awry during that season. So I think this whole aspect of accountability is good. And then the couple-to-couple thing, we've mentioned that several times, and we just can't mention it enough, because this personal relationship develops between the two that allows for this mentoring to go on beyond the premarital and even beyond the postmarital.
We say we did this out of what we didn't have. And so we had one session with my pastor in his office without his wife. And the only thing I remember him talking about was submission.
Really?
That was it. We didn't talk about anything else. One session, that was it. Yep, you're ready to get married. Boom. And so it's like, no, there's a lot more to it than that. So, yeah.
Yeah, the day is over of this is a cute, godly couple and they ought to get married. And because the divorce rate is in the church is just as severe as it is outside the church. And so, Larry, the bottom line for us is in doing this work isn't so we sell books or make money. It's to train, to equip, to make sure couples are getting the best pre and postmarital that they can get, so that their marriage is a lasting marriage and they do not themselves find divorce to be a solution for them.
This is amazing. It is an amazing book. I've recommended it all over the world. Called Together. Ask the difficult questions that all couples must answer before they say, I do. And so thank you, the two of you, for putting this together, being so faithful over the years to continue to update it, and make it usable for people, not just in America, but literally all over the world. Again, check out the show notes. Everyone listening today, Steve and Mary are prolific writers. I'm going to have you back. We're going to talk about staying together. We get called together. We're going to talk about staying together. Any last minute thoughts the two of you have before we close out for today? This has been so refreshing.
I do. I have one. I'm always researching and always looking at the latest marriage information and statistics and that type of thing. And the incidences of couples living together has been increasing steadily, thinking that that's an answer. And it's a try it to see if you like it answer. The incidences then of breaking up is at an all-time high rate. It used to be the couple, finish high school, finish college, get into their career, date, go to relationship, have a relationship, maybe even move in with 2 or 3 other relationships and live together for a season. And then eventually you're now in your late 30s, you figure you better tie the knot with someone. And biblically that has rubbed us the wrong way, and we've taught a different way. However, today, even in a blog that I recently wrote, that's all changing.
Yeah.
And now science is catching up with the scriptures and encouraging couples not to live together because of the actual divorce rate thereafter. Encouraging couples even that they can marry younger and remain committed into a long-term relationship, as you and your wife have had, as we have had. So I'm very grateful and thankful that even science today is coming around saying, try it, see if you like it. Works in most things, but not in a committed marriage relationship. It does not work.
Stephen Ray Prokopchaks, thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you pick up the book Called Together. And if you enjoyed today's topic, we've got Steve and Mary coming back. And so make sure you subscribe to this podcast, Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast, so you don't miss our next episode featuring Steve and Mary talking about their book, Staying Together. Listen wherever you get podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you get podcasts, you can connect with us. Thank you for joining us today for the Larry Kreider Leadership Podcast. Thank you, Steve and Mary, for being here, giving us this refreshing time on Called Together. And we're so glad you joined us today. God bless you. Look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you for listening to Larry Kreider's Leadership Podcast. If you want more information about any of Larry's books, daily devotionals, small group resources, or any other teachings, go to larrykreider.com.